Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. Today, we're going back to the basics, looking at some of the daily little habits that can make all the difference in the world when it comes to our emotional well-being. I am joined by special guest Keri Cooper. She's the owner of Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy in Northern New Jersey. She has her own private practice where she counsels teens and she works to give them the tools they need to navigate life. She takes a holistic approach to therapy, looking at the whole person, not just their symptoms, and really looking at that health piece as well. So she's going to help walk us through some of those daily habits that are going to help our kids build that resilience and long-term emotional and physical well-being. Hope you enjoy. Well, hello, Keri. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
And thank you so much for having me.
Well, why don't we start off with having you introduce yourself to everyone listening?
Sure. My name is Keri Cooper. I am a holistic psychotherapist. So, of course, the first question is, what the heck is a holistic psychotherapist? I was very traditionally trained. And at some point in my career, I said, I think we're missing something. And I wound up really looking at the link between physical health and mental health. And I think it's overlooked a lot. So when kids come to me, I specialize really with high school and college kids. When they come to me and say, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I don't have motivation, I don't have focus or attention, not only do I do traditional psychotherapy and skills and tools, but I also say, and how are you sleeping? And how are you eating? And are you seeing the light of day? And are you exercising? And all that good stuff that I think we forget.
Right.
And just as adults as well, I think we forget that. So that's kind of who I am in a quick, synopsis of my practice. But because of that, because of the connection between the foundations of physical health and mental health, I'm also an author of two books that combine those as well: Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know. And I have the same book in a workbook form for the teens.
Oh, that's great. Well, why don't we start with that? Why is that important, that connection between the physical health and mental health?
It's so funny when we are parents to toddlers and our toddlers don't nap and they're cranky and they're fussy and they're having meltdowns over, silly things. We go, oh, it's because they didn't nap. They didn't get enough sleep. But when our teens do it, we don't make that connection. We don't go, oh, they're grumpy and, they're irritable because they didn't sleep well last night. We're just like, oh, they're moody teenagers. But we're forgetting that sleep is such a critical piece of it. When we're sleep deprived as adults, what happens to us the next day? We can't problem solve well. We can't focus well. We're grumpy. We're moody. So it is so hard as a therapist to just address the grumpiness, the moodiness, and all of that without addressing the sleep, which is leading to that. I always say to the kids I work with, if your physical foundation's not there, your mental health is always going to be an uphill battle. And I think we forget that sometimes, that that's the foundation.
Yeah. And that's true. I do a lot of talks and workshops, and it doesn't matter if I'm talking about ADHD or behaviors or anxiety. I'm always saying it's so much harder if these kids aren't getting very basic needs met, like not eating breakfast, not having good sleep, not being hydrated, right? Where we really are only going to make very little headway, right, if those things aren't being addressed. So,
Absolutely. And it was really during the pandemic that it was so obvious to me that there was such a huge issue with that. I mean, kids were sleeping all weird hours. I mean, their sleep was half of them were nocturnal, I felt like. It was just so bad. And actually, that's when I wrote both books because the mental health crisis during COVID was just through the roof. And I, virtually couldn't get enough people into my office. I was overbooked. Every therapist I knew was overbooked. And I had parents calling me, leaving me voicemails, just crying, being like, I don't know what to do about my children. And I said, I have to get the information out there. So that's why I wrote the books during that time period. But since then, they've been such a great resource because it really does show you with the research behind it why this is so important right now. And it's
mhm.
so, I don't want to say easy, but it's so foundational. And like we know it, like when we hear it, oh, we need to sleep, we need to eat well, we need to exercise, we need to hydrate. We're like, yeah, of course. But when you look at our kids, this isn't happening.
And why do you think that is?
I think some of it, there's a lot of different reasons. I think sleep, one of the big issues is the phones definitely get in the way. And I always say your children and you should not have your phones in your bedroom.
Yeah.
They should always be plugged in outside because no good phone calls coming in at 2 in the morning to your children anyway. Don't put that, don't put them in that position. Take the phones out of the bedroom.
Yeah.
But, they're sitting there scrolling and they don't even realize what time it is. Or after school, instead of just getting their homework done, they're scrolling, they're, TikTok watching, all of that. And all of a sudden now it's 7 o'clock at night and they're starting homework. So kids always tell me, I have so much homework. Do you really have so much homework? Or is it that you're being distracted every few minutes by 30 minutes of scrolling?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big piece for sure. And then I mean with the screens, the melatonin is
Yes.
affected as
Yes.
well, right? Yeah, so it's just this vicious cycle.
It is. It's a completely vicious cycle. And then when we talk about, food, it has never been easier to get food with just ordering online or door dashing or anything like that. And they're just getting so much junk. And then they're consuming so much sugar.
Hmm.
And sugar, of course, is going to impact how we could fall asleep at night. And the same with the caffeine, with all the Starbucks and energy drinks and all of that that's happening.
Right. And our brain takes up, this is one thing that I often tell parents, our brain uses up like 25% of our calories. And so if it's not being fueled properly, again, our brain isn't going to be focusing on math when it's focusing on trying to get the basic nutrients, that the brain and the body need to be able to function. Um, and sleep too. I know a big conversation. I have two teenage daughters, one that I'm having right now with my girls, and especially my younger one, because she loves sleeping in. My older one's good. She keeps a
Mhm.
fairly consistent schedule, but my younger one will stay up late, go to sleepovers and sleep in all day just to go back on Monday. And like you're essentially jet lagging yourself every single weekend.
Yes.
You are jet lagging yourself. And she's like, oh, whatever. Not understanding that it really does affect our circadian rhythm.
It does. And there's no such thing as catching up on sleep. It's
Right,
not like you can have all this sleep deprivation and then try to catch up on the weekends. It doesn't work like that.
right,
And the other issue that we're seeing, especially with a lot of the research out there, is that the sleep you get before midnight is actually so important that it changes how your brain is flushing everything, how your organs are functioning. It's actually the sleep before midnight. And so when these kids are going to bed, especially on weekends at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, even though they're getting 8, 9 hours of sleep, sometimes even more, it doesn't mean they're getting good sleep. Like we are not meant to be nocturnal. We are meant to go to sleep when the sun sets and then wake up when it rises. That is our body's actual natural rhythm. And that's what we need in order for our cells to repair, for our immune system to kick on, for our growth hormones to kick in. All that happens when we sleep.
right. So, what are some things, I think, just breaking it down into some of those really small daily steps that are manageable and doable? What would
Yeah.
some of those things be?
I think my favorite step, and I know that this is a struggle, but it's a really important struggle, is to get the phones out of the bedroom. We have an entire phone docking station, charging station in my hallway. And that's where all the phones go at night, including mine, because I don't want to be woken up either in the middle of the night. So, especially if all my kids are home, my phone's there. And everyone's phones are docked there, and that's what needs to happen. And it really does make such a difference. And the earlier you start that, the easier it is to continue. And yes, there's only, you only have so much control. When they go off to college, you obviously can't control it. But if they're in a good rhythm with it, you hope that at least they put it on do not disturb at night or something like that. That way their sleep is protected. The other thing is, when they're sitting doing their homework, try to remind them if you take your phone out of your room, you're going to get your homework done in probably half the time. And a lot of the college kids I work with have really understood this and learned this. And many of them are starting to actually leave their phones in their dorm rooms when they go to the library to get their work done because they understand it just takes them such a shorter amount of time if their phone is not with them.
Yeah. They just need the experience of it first. And so if there is pushback, I always like to set it up as an experiment. Let's
Hmm.
experiment. Let's collect some data. What would happen? How much homework are you getting done when your phone is here? versus there. Let's actually make it objective, right? And
Mhm.
concrete so that you can actually see the difference. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Absolutely. And parents really need to model this. It's not something that you could just tell your children to do. You need to model it. So when we talk about sleep, especially, parents need to role model good sleep habits. And I've heard way too many stories of parents just not sleeping at night and, doing dishes at 4 in the morning or laundry at 3 in the morning. You need to prioritize your sleep. That way you show them how important it is. You are the role model. So because of that, because sleep has been such an issue with parents as well, I actually, side note, I also became a certified sleep science coach and I work with adults virtually on sleep because it's so important.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It is. So are there other things that we could be doing just to help support, being able to get to sleep specifically? I'm sure there's other realms that we can look into, but with the sleep piece.
Of course, I think one of the other, really important things is to try to have a good routine throughout the day in terms of not just rotting in bed.
Mm.
So, trying to constantly, it's harder with your teenagers, but trying to constantly get your teenagers out of their bedrooms. Help me cook dinner. Let's go for a walk. Like, try to have them out of that bedroom and connected because the more energy they're spending, the less time they're sitting in their bed, the easier it's going to be to fall asleep at night. One of the big problems I hear constantly is, well, I lay in my bed and my thoughts just wander and I can't sleep. And that's really common because your brain has not associated bed with sleep. When you only use your bed for sleep, your brain starts associating that. But when we're living out of our beds, eating in our beds, doing our homework in our beds, our mind is not associating bed equals sleep. So to start trying to have that association, to start trying to get your kids out of their room more and more, or if they are in their room, trying to encourage them to sit at a desk if they're doing work or just a chair anywhere, but not their bed.
Right. And that's such a huge one. I know adults, it's a little bit easier, I think. Maybe not, because I do know a lot of adults who will sit and binge watch Netflix in their bed,
Yeah.
right? And so, and we know our brain is all about associations, and that's another really easy one that we think about. But I think it's just so easy to fall into bad habits, especially again, screens, whether it's a
Yes.
phone, whether it's a TV. So it's looking at all of those things that are keeping us in bed. Yeah. Finding a better place, another place.
Yes. And it really does make such a difference.
Right.
So, and again, like you want your time with your family. This is important time to connect. That's important for their mental health. That's important for all of our mental health to feel connected to human beings. And like we have our tribe, and that starts with our family.
Yeah.
So the more you can get them out of their rooms, and again, as they get older, it becomes more and more of a struggle. But the more you kind of encourage it as they're younger, I think the easier it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then,
And
another thing that we haven't really touched on, but just a little bit, is food.
right. I was going to ask about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so family dinners are huge. There's so much research behind family dinners that if you want a child who has better grades, who's less likely to use drugs, the more you have family dinner, the better all of those will be. It's a time to connect, but it's also you're getting them out of their bedroom. That way they're not, I mean, I've heard too many stories of food being served and people just coming in, grabbing their plates and going off to their bedrooms.
Mhm.
Eat together in the kitchen, talk. Even if it's a disaster of a family meal and everyone's fighting, it's still better than everybody being alone in their rooms eating.
Yes, exactly.
So don't think that you're going to have this perfect family dinner every night. You're not. Let's be realistic. But again, even the arguing and the fighting is better than everybody being in their own bedrooms. So have everybody come together at the table for dinner. And that's also important in terms of cooking healthy, nutritious meals. So your kids are getting the nutrients that they need and not being filled with sugar and processed food and then trying to, come down off that sugar to go to sleep at night.
Right. Are there specific foods that would be best around that dinner time in the evening just to help promote sleep later on?
There's a lot of food that is good for sleep, such as a lot of the nuts will do that for you as long as you don't have a nut allergy. Turkey's another really great one. We all know that from, Thanksgiving dinners that everyone gets tired afterwards. But really, anything that is protein based and some nice veggies, that's going to be great to help your sleep at night.
Mhm.
Um, the processed food, it's just our body needs to like break that down and it's hard work. And that's another thing. When you eat really late, when you're sleeping, your body's still trying to digest, so it doesn't have the room to do everything it needs to do while it's sleeping. So you can't just eat right before bed.
What is is it like 3 hours before
That's around
about?
what they say. Everyone's
Yeah,
body's kind of different.
right.
But if you're eating dinner around like 6 o'clock at night, that's pretty good. Six,
Yeah,
6:30.
yeah. And then the sun's going down, and then, yeah,
Mhm.
we're winding down for
We're winding down. Exactly.
exactly. Yeah. And anything for, going to school in the morning. I don't know if that's something that you ever touch on, just when we're looking at these small little things, just to help them get their learning brain going and warmed up to go to
Yeah.
school.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, breakfast.
Yeah.
It's so important. But it also depends on what breakfast are you giving your kids. Again, the sugary processed with no nutrients isn't going to help anything. It's protein, 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 protein. I can't
Yeah.
talk about it enough. If
Yeah.
they have a little protein in the morning, it's going to help them focus in school. It's going to stabilize their blood sugar. A lot of the times when we talk about moody teens, you're actually talking about blood sugar, how it's being spiked and then they're crashing and then they're eating something else and they're spiking it and then they're crashing and they look like they have a mood disorder
Yeah.
when really it's just the sugar.
Right. Yeah. And dehydration too, we
Oh,
know it
yes.
brings out cortisol. Our body produces more cortisol when we're dehydrated. So just making sure we are drinking throughout the day makes all the difference in the world.
It really does. And it makes sense. And we're like, oh yeah, everyone knows this, but they don't. I just had a kid coming to my office and she was complaining about sleep. And then she walks in my office one day and she had like a 6:30 appointment and she comes in with a Starbucks. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was like, you're complaining about sleep all the time. She's like, oh yeah, but caffeine doesn't affect me. No, 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 caffeine does affect you.
Hmm.
It absolutely does.
And quite substantially. Like I think the last that I heard was even after 11 o'clock in the morning, it can
Mhm.
really affect. And that's for adults. So I don't even know what it's like for teens.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, noon is definitely the latest anyone should be having any sort of caffeine.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any other things, little habits that the kids could be doing or parents could be doing to support their kids?
I think one really important thing to kind of get your kids involved in all of this is, talk to them about like, hey, especially when they get older, cooking is a life skill. And
Hmm.
that's something that's kind of been lost a little bit. Like back in the day, we had like home ec classes and, we learned to cook. And a lot of these kids are not learning how to cook. And that also hurts their self-confidence. Like when they feel like they could be independent and do things on their own, that really helps their confidence level. So when they feel like they can't even cook a simple meal, that's a struggle, especially when they go off to college. And, many times as they get older in college, they have, kitchens there and they need the basics. So bring your kids into it. Hey, find a recipe. Let's cook this together. What do you think we should have? Like get them involved, and then they're so much more likely to buy in, of course.
Yeah. And to eat what is made too. It's interesting. I actually don't make dinner anymore. My girls do. Well, one of my girls, my younger
Mhm.
one does. And it's funny, we're gonna go away as a family, but my older one, she started university. So she's like, I have to stay. I have to, take my courses. So my little one, who's still just in grade 8, is like, I need to stay home with her because she's not going to be able to feed herself. She needs someone to cook meals for her. It's so funny, because my little one loves cooking, and she does. She makes our dinners most nights, unless she's got, after
Yeah.
school activity or something like that. But she loves doing it. Whereas my older one, she can make grilled cheese, she can make some scrambled eggs, but
Right.
it really is such an important skill. Hmm.
It is. It's a life skill. It's something I feel like we've gotten away from so much. And again, that goes back to the parents that everybody is just so busy. And every time, in my office, a parent walks in, I'm like, how are you doing? They're like, oh, just running around. And I'm like, well, let's stop. What do we keep on saying yes to that we need to start saying no to?
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing to also teach our children. I see a lot with young girls, people pleasing behavior, that they keep on saying yes when they want to say no. And so much of that is learned from their well-meaning moms who just say yes, yes, yes to everything and don't put up those boundaries and don't say no. And that's actually a chapter in my whole book too. Like we have to teach our kids to say no. And we as adults have to say no.
Right.
And that's a
Yeah,
hard thing to do.
it is.
That's not easy. But to look at your calendar, what you actually want to be doing. I mean, some things you just have to do. I get that. But there's a lot that you don't need to do.
And it's being able to prioritize, like what
Mhm.
really is the most important. And these things that, these pillars of health, we know that they're important, just like what you said at the very beginning. We know what we're
Mhm.
supposed to do, but we don't do it, even though it's so simple and it would make all the difference in the world. But it really is prioritizing. I know it's hard to find the time to sit down to make a good meal and sit down and eat that meal, but it's also hard being disconnected and unhealthy and anxious. So, I'm
Absolutely.
always saying choose your hard, right?
Yes.
At the end of
And
the
also,
day.
don't jump in and try to do everything at once.
No,
Small changes are the way to build. So if your small change is just, I want to make sure the kids are having breakfast in the morning, that's your small change that you work on.
right.
If the next change is dinner, great. And find out what works for you and what works for your family. I know for me, it's Sunday morning. I'm like, okay, what are we having this week? And we write out our whole meal plan and we go food shopping. And I kind of prep everything for the week, whether that be just cutting up a lot of stuff and storing it until I'm about to cook it or what I'm marinating or whatever. But once you get into the habit of it, it just becomes so much easier. But like anything, it's hard to start. But once
Right.
you start and stay consistent with it, it becomes second nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I started doing that Sunday thing many times, but lasts for a week or two. But we do have good routines in other ways. And I think too, setting the one small piece, even if you are just focusing on dinner, but still only have one goal in that dinner. I think
Mhm.
parents sometimes will think, okay, we're going to do dinner, but they want it perfect, meaning
Yeah.
we're going to be loving each other and happy and eating healthy, and we're not fighting about food and we're not fighting. Just pick one thing. Is it to
Mhm.
come and connect? Is it to
Right.
come and eat something healthy? Just pick one thing and focus on that. Let the rest go, and then you can start building off of that. Because I think that sometimes we get wrapped up in too. I want this one thing perfect in all the ways.
Absolutely. And one of the smallest steps that I find is a pretty easy one for people to start kind of on their journey of health is get rid of everything except for water in your house.
Mm,
I mean, it costs nothing. You're
yeah,
saving money. Um, and it's just such an important factor in health. And you're already now cutting out probably sugar and caffeine. Just go on to water for everybody. And it's a simple step. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's normally the easiest one.
yeah, yeah. That's a great one. That's all we drink at our house.
Yeah.
We have some coconut milk for cereal every so often, but yeah, no, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's all we drink. And it's, interesting. Lots of times with the kids I work with to try to get them hooked in to making some positive changes, the easiest one is water because a lot of them will complain to me about like their skin and, it's breaking out or it's dry. And I'm like, hydration would help all of this. So sometimes that's the easiest way to hook them in because they actually do see the results from it.
Yeah, yeah, which is great.
Hmm.
Well, lots of good reminders. I think it's just, again, hearing it again and knowing
Yeah.
how to break it down is really helpful. Anything left unsaid that's important to say that we've missed so far?
I don't want to overwhelm people. So, there's always more and more to do. But start wherever you can start, whatever feels right for you. But anything that kind of leads you on this journey of health is really going to help your children and your entire family and yourself. And again, we get so wrapped up in anxiety, they're moody. What do we do? Just narrow it down and bring it back to the foundations of are they sleeping? Are they eating well? Are they hydrated? Are they moving their bodies? Just start looking there.
Yeah. And modeling it rather than
Yes.
telling them. I mean, it really does start with us to change their behavior. It starts with us. So instead of telling them what to do, we need to first start modeling it and bringing it into the house and into the lifestyle in the first place. And
Absolutely. One
yeah.
of the really important things that I did a few years ago was I even caught myself just scrolling on my screen sometimes. And I was like, what am I doing? So I started putting my phone away in another room and putting more books around my house. So now if my kids walk into the living room and I have nothing to do, they'll see me reading a book. And that's how we start modeling this behavior.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I am so much more productive with my phone not around me because it sucks everybody in. That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I'm always saying, self-care isn't consumption. So if you're consuming any screens, food, like unless it is nourishing and
Mhm.
at meal times and things like that. But yeah, consumption is not great. So, well, thank you so much. This is just a nice reminder. I will have all of your information in the show notes, but for the people who are listening, where is the very best place to reach you?
Most likely my website, which is kericooperholistictherapy.com, and my books are on Amazon, Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know.
Great. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.